Right, good morning and welcome to the second part, probably of 3 or 4, or definitely of 3, but possibly of 4, looking at Hull. This time I'm going right into the city centre. As we can see here, this is the, well, you can't really see here perhaps, but this is the City Hall, this block here, and this is the Maritime Museum here, over here, formerly the dock offices, the sort of triangular shaped building here. So all these other roads that radiate off here go into this sort of, I'd say, a bit more of a more modern shopping centre. If you come in from the railway station, you normally come in on this one here, Jameson Street, which is opposite Paragon Street, and then turn right to come down to King Edward Street into Queen Victoria Square, which is this area around here. So that's the area that I'm coming into. All the buildings were demolished in this area in 1897, when Hull was bestowed city status on it. And so what we're looking at here, of course, is in the centre there is Queen Victoria herself. This was a statue by a chap called Henry Charles Fair. He's born 1867, died in 1940. And because it was unveiled by the Prince of Wales in 1903. So that's what we see there in the centre. And behind her stands the City Hall. If I can find my mouse. And this was quite a late addition to the square because it was completed in 1916. It's sort of the work started on it in 1903, sorry, completed 1909. It was badly damaged in the Blitz of Hull, which I mentioned because they right at the beginning in 1941, because they when lots of people died, and it flattened most of the city centre, and because they badly damaged, and then was repaired and opened in 1950. It's rather unusual in that the concert hall itself is up here on the first floor, so you got the steps on the inside. This was to allow shops to be, because they put on the ground floor all the way around in order to make the building pay. Because that's what a lot of sort of local authorities did at that time, because of the complaints about the money being spent on public buildings. And if they could prove is that they had an income coming from it, then it sort of put off those levels of complaints. Because there was quite a frieze on top of here, and on either side of the door, which in these alcoves here, because they are mass of comedy and tragedy as well, so really saying what goes on in there. At the moment, you can't get really anywhere near it, as you can see on here, but it's a COVID testing or centre at the moment. So, but it seems that they have some concerts coming up because the ticket office was actually open. If you want to have a look inside, and this is what it looks like, because it holds 1,700 people. Because say it sort of hosts larger concerts, and even we've had the Beatles appear here. So there tends to be sort of a mix of things. This is a Hull University graduation ceremony taking place in there. So that takes up the sort of the bulk of the frontage of the sort of west side of the square itself, although it's actually round. But let's look at some of the other buildings which are around it. So the City Hall's here, and we're going to come over here. This is the Ferens Art Gallery, and the other building to look at in here is the Punch Hotel, which is next to it. The more modern building behind that, that's a shopping centre that was constructed in 1991. But when I come back to finish this route around the city centre, we'll come up here and come back into the Queen Victoria Square itself. So the Ferens Art Gallery over here, obviously it's closed at the moment and probably is until I think the museum's allowed to open on May the 17th, but I might be wrong on that. And it takes its name from a Liberal MP, Thomas Ferens, who gave £50,000 for its construction in 1926, because the site before that was formerly a church built in 1791 and closed in 1917, and because they demolished for this. Ferens was very much a public benefactor because he also helped to establish Hull University as well. The church here was called St John's before that, and because there was a small admission price normally paid to go in, and because there are galleries on 2 floors, it extends quite widely as well, and so there's have a permanent collection and also have touring works come in as well. So the permanent collection includes works of Canaletto, Henry Moore and David Hockney as well in there. So that's the Ferens. So next door to that is the Punch Hotel. You can see the side of the Ferens. This is Prince's Quay Shopping Centre, because it's better view coming across from the former dock, the other side, which you'll see on Wednesday. And so the Punch Hotel, it's a bit of a tradition, I guess, in Hull of building these very fine ones. I showed you one before called the was it the Humber Dock on the side of the Marina, which had the Leeds Fireclay green bricks on the front of it. And like I say, there are a couple within this square as well, or nearby. Punch Hotel, this was built in 1896, and this is built from Bermontoft's pottery. Well, that's the frontage of this is. I guess it's sort of making a statement as well. So we'll see two more on this route. There's one at the just beyond the other side of the square called the Empress, and then one towards Drypool Bridge, all built around about this sort of 1890s, early 1900s as well. Like I say, probably to attract customers in. So that's the Punch Hotel. And then looking to the east side of the square, we have, because of these opulent buildings round here. To the left, that is the former Yorkshire Penny Bank of 1901, because very unusual sort of double turret type style tower on there. It's now a Cafe Nero in there, because it extends further along there. I think there's an extension of 1916 as well put onto there. But the main one here, which is the former dock offices, these was turned into the Maritime Museum in 1975. It's closed at the moment for refurbishment. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But the former dock offices here were built in 1871 for the Hull Dock Company, and it's got three domed towers on this triangular shaped building. It had to be really sort of triangular shaped because of the site that it was built on. Just beyond here we had the Queen's Dock that's now being filled, and we're walking down that in a minute, just at the end of the street. And obviously we've got this other dock coming in here, and so there was sort of it was contained by that. It was designed by a chap called George Christopher Ray, and unusually it's his only public building that he actually built in Britain. Most of his buildings were done in India, where he was sort of an architect to, I guess, the British Embassy out there as well, and also to a large hotel in Cairo in Egypt as well. And this is the really, I think, as I understand this, is the third of the dock offices that the company had. The second one still stands, and that's on the very top of High Street. It's a bit that we're not going along, and sometimes it's called Dock Office Row. That area is about to be redeveloped, and I'll mention a bit more about that later on, because that's where we're going to be putting the Arctic Corsair, the Sidewinder trawler that used to be in the River Hull outside the Transport Museum. And so this is the most opulent part of this one is the pediment, and up here we'll see that he's got the Hull Dock Company crest in the centre up there. On either side is that we should be able to see at an angle the three crowns of Hull itself, and the other one here is the arms of Trinity House. And that's what we'll be seeing on Wednesday. Because it's a large, most of the city centre as well. Because it's closed at the moment, and you won't be able to go in for rather a long time. So this is the previous photographs as well, and because the rooms are very elaborate inside, and it's very large as well, and it's always on 3 floors, including the undercroft or the cellars of it as well. And because it's really and it's probably still going to contain a history of the port and sort of the vessels, and there were lots of before this, lots of sort of replica vessels in glass cases as well. They've moved all the objects out for its redevelopment. There were 50,000 of them contained in it, and it's currently undergoing a £12 million refurbishment refurbishment. That started in January 2020, and it won't reopen until 2024. I think they said late 2023, but I guess another article said 2024 on that. So that's the Maritime Museum. It's normally free to go in, so whether it remains so after it reopens or not, I don't know, but I guess it will, because of the other museums in Hull are free. So we're going to go down this street to the back of the Maritime Museum, New Cross Street, and immediately around the back, because it's against some scaffolding at the moment, is the Merchant Navy Memorial. When I first went to Hull, it used to be a rather large sort of a chain and anchor a bit further around in the sort of a pedestrian area. So this was placed here in 2013. I could say it's the prow of a ship, and it is really just to the men and women who lost their lives serving in the Merchant Navy. It's 13 feet high, or 4 meters high, cost £30,000 as well, and it's to 17,000 seamen lost on 5,000 ships in World War I. It's incredible that 35,000 merchant seamen lost their lives in World War II, but on really half that number of ships, 2,450 ships. There's a silver plaque to the side of that. So that's the sort of a tour around there. So this is the bit of film looking around it. So let's look at the next part of this journey. So we've come to, that's where the Merchant Navy Memorial is. It wouldn't allow me to draw a line straight down the centre of Queen's Garden. This is the former Queen's Dock. And at the far end has got the statue of William Wilberforce. So it's That's the next part of the route we're going to do. When I mentioned about the former dock office here, the earlier dock office, it's on this road here, the dock office road, at the end of the high street that crosses this main road. It's an area I won't be going up today, but I plan to do another route around Hull, which looks at the northern side of it. So perhaps I'll come down this to end at this end of High Street as well, because some quite fine buildings on here as well. But today we're going to go as far as Drypool Bridge and then down the High Street. So let's have a look down the Queen's Gardens then. This was sort of, again, was all part of the city centre, but became sort of pedestrianised around here, and really to sort of, I guess, form a link between the city centre and the dock itself. The building in the background, which you see on the film, that's the BBC building here as well, with flats above that. So we're going to turn around and go down into the gardens. I could say just putting this in where the Empress is. I could say across the road from it as well, but it's fairly obvious when you're on the round here as well. It's rather unusual, this building as well, because it says 1903 up there in the pediment. But if you look behind it, is that it's sort of not the same part of the building. It's actually refronted this in 1903 in like I say, this arts and crafts style frontage on here. Because they've recently been painted as well, looked in the last year. But prior to 1903, it was actually a warehouse, and that's what we can see behind here before it was turned into a pub. Like I say, it's a tradition of these sort of fairly ornate pub fronts that Hull has. So this is the Queen's Gardens, as it's called today. This was the very first dock that was built in Hull in 1778, but it fell into disuse in 1930, was then filled in during 1935. It covers 11 acres, and it's really sort of a city park right in the centre of it. If you've not been to Hull recently, because they've been looking at this sort of a sculpture that has been put in here as well. It's been purposely left sunk, so you can see at the sides here, that was the sort of the original dock wall coming along here, and we'll see it the other side as well. So if you walk down either side of those paths, you are walking along there as well. And so this grand thing here is called the Solar Gate, installed in 2017 when Hull was the city of culture. It's two things really, and I think you've really got to be here at night to see its full effect. And so it's like a sundial, but when like I say, in the early evening, light passes through these holes in here, and there are sort of stainless steel discs set in the floor, and certain rays of light will go through that and illuminate a disc. It's also quite unusual. It's like two shelves being clamped together, and so it looks very like all these holes in it as well. And so it stands 10 meters high. That's about 30 feet, 4 meters wide as well. As I say, the width of it, you better see it on the bit of film, is about less than a meter deep in places. So it's sort of a wedge type of thing, I would say as well, and is made up of these plates, which are just 4 millimeters thick in places. That's why it's got all these perforations around it. It was designed by I don't know where they come from, but Tonkin Liu, that's Liu, who did this. And like I say, best going there at night, and because I haven't been in Hull at night, but like I say, those lights come through there, so it can be rays of sunshine, it can be illuminated lights that will go onto a disc set in the floor. There's 16 of these, and when the lights at the right angle going through there, it will illuminate one of these discs to reveal something in Hull's history or in world events which might have affected the city and port of Hull itself. This is really, part of a new sort of facelift, as they're going to call it. They're going to spend £4.3 million on the gardens. It plans to include an amphitheatre in here, where I guess they're going to dig some of the garden out, or create, maybe take one of the ponds out, so that it'll create sort of space in there where people sit around there, and I guess there could be a performance area and things like that. and say they're going to put sort of more sort of sculpture in here, but looks sort of at the whaling industry. We might have a second thoughts about that, with the sort of, as they call them, the woke generation, looking at statues of the past and sort of having them banned at the moment. So I guess is that the sort of maybe the whaling industry might not be the best idea that Hull will have. So let's have just a quick look around here as well, because this is the some of the water in here, and because that's the original side to the dock itself. And sort of coming further over here, we've got this cafe. When I first went into Hull, this was called the Mick Ronson Cafe, so called after the David Bowie's guitarist. He was Hull born here in 1946, and played with David Bowie between 1970 and 73. Also played with Bob Dylan and other people. He died of liver cancer in April 1993. It's no longer called that, but when we come to look at Paragon Station on part 4 of Hull, is that there's a plaque in there to his memory as well. But they're still worth going across here because there's a plaque over here, and this one is to Robinson Crusoe, placed here in 1973. And at the beginning of that book, it said that Robinson Crusoe sailed from Hull on the 1st of September 1651 and was shipwrecked on an island for 28 years, 2 months and 19 days. And that's what it basically says in the wording underneath that plaque there. So the unusual thing, with a location with that. Other artwork down here, and this is just called Untitled. That's what it's a bit about it there. Sort of modernist architecture was commissioned in 1959, and this was done by a Hull College of Art lecturer. The art school is at the end of Queen's Gardens, where the Wilberforce monument is, and these were created by Kenneth Carter. So coming to the end of the Queen's Gardens, and this stands not at the end but just over the road in front of Hull College itself. And on the film you'll see there's a pond at the end of the Queen's Gardens. I guess there's some more modernist sculpture in there as well, and that's by Robert Adams, an artist, lived 1917 to 1984, again commissioned at the same time as the other ones in 1959. I think it's one of the few examples of his work in Britain. But behind there is where the Wilberforce monument is today. It's moved a few times around here. One time it was on Monument Bridge. It's really where we're ending. It's at the close to the Queen Victoria Square, just by the Beverley Gate. But this monument was erected in 1834. They first stood on the High Street near his house, and then moved to Monument Bridge and then moved here. So it's got a very sort of grand vista when you come down to the Queen's Gardens at the end of it. It stands 90 feet high, and it's probably impossible to see a statue on top of there. He was the Hull-born MP who represented the city and abolished slavery as well. The Hull College that stands behind opened in 1962. We'll learn a bit more about Wilberforce when we go down High Street and to his house, which remains down there. But here we'll have a look at the film coming down the Queen's Gardens. So the next part of the route is going round the Guildhall, which is really only a sort of 2 or 3 minute walk away. It's this great block that stands down here as well. So this road coming to the right of the Wilberforce monument brings you in front of the Guildhall, but at the moment it's got scaffolding all the way around it. So I've had to use some earlier photographs because that's part of the repair of that tower. And then looking at some of the buildings around here, that's the post office here. This is St Mary's Church on the corner here of Chapel Lane. Chapel Lane leads down to the High Street because all these other roads lead down to it as well. We're coming down as far as where it meets Scale Lane, and we're going to Scale Lane Stave onto this bridge, which looks like an apostrophe or a comma across the river there. This block here, that's the Magistrates Court here of 2002, transferred from what it used to be inside the Guildhall itself. Then coming on this road here out to the Drypool Bridge, because it was famous at one time for these rather large flour mills here, which have now since been demolished. So let's have a look at this area around here. So this is sort of the view that you're sort of getting when the scaffolding will come off the Guildhall, which is this tower here. This has also got scaffolding around it at the moment as well. It's quite interesting to see these towers, turrets, and that's the dome. It looks like it could have been of some sort of eastern building or something like that, but that's the dome of the Magistrates Court here as well. The tower building, just get the dates, that's 1881. And like I say, the bottom of it up to these sort of round windows here was 1881. They added these other 2 stories in here as well in 1881. So it was raised up at that time, was built as a warehouse next to it as well. I mentioned before, the Crown Court is 2002. And the Guildhall as well, we'll see that's 1916, I think that is as well, when we come round to see that. But I say quite a wonderful view looking round here. So let's move round onto the Guildhall side, because this is what you will be able to see, and I guess I'll clean it as well. It stands on the front of, because it's a Guildhall reflecting back to those sort of medieval guilds which Hull would have had. It was then demolished, what stood here, and an earlier town hall was built here in 1865, built by the Holborn architect Cuthbert Broderick, mostly well known for his buildings of the town hall and Corn Exchange and the Mechanics Institute, now the library, the museum in Leeds. But really, that's really one of the very few buildings that he actually built or designed himself in Hull. I guess it was deemed too small because they wanted to add the sort of magistrates court onto that. And I guess they probably thought it was cheaper to build a new building. And I think there's probably a bit of pressing by the mayor at the time, Alfred Gelder, who was also an architect as well, who probably wanted to leave his own stamp on the city. And therefore, when he was mayor, probably had the plans pushed through. And he was indeed the architect of the Guildhall. Just looking at these other things, that's the City Hotel here. And we're going to look at this statue next. This is the statue of Charles, of Charles Wilson for first Lord Numbenhome. He was born 1833, died in 1907. He had a large house he lived in called Water Priory, out at Water on the Wolds. I guess it's about 20 odd miles away. And he was, why he got his statue here, because he was once the head of the world's largest shipping company, the Wilson Line. I mentioned them before, carried quite a lot of people over from the Baltic states who passed through Hull on the way to Liverpool and then to new lives in Canada and America as well. And so that, because he was MP for Hull for 32 years, placed here after his death placed here in 1910, he died in 1907. So he stands at the front of that square, looking southwards across the city. So this is the massive Guildhall. It's sort of absolutely phenomenally large. Halfway down why we've got this other entrance here. This was the entrance to the law courts. I think we had a visit here in 2016 and had organised a trip down here, so we could see the sort of the courts on the street level around here. And I think there's 35 of these columns all the way down here as well. And there's also some enormous statues on the top. But this is Alfred Gelder Street, because they named after the architect and mayor. He was mayor 1899 to 1903. He was also responsible for many other buildings and areas of Hull as well, including the laying out of Paragon Street. That's the one that sort of lies behind the City Hall that we've just seen, where the sort of Punch Hotel is, I guess, right at the, at the end of Paragon Street there. But it's to the roof here that we see two huge monuments or sculptures up here. That's the one at the west end. There's also one at the east end, which is, you can see them both here together. They are by the Glasgow-born sculptor Albert Hodge, because they don't know much about him at all, and because they are called Maritime Prowess, and that's what you can see above there. I think they weigh something like 30 tons each, so the building of the to support those statues must have been quite phenomenal. So whether the 30 tons includes all the stonework around here or just to the statue itself, I've no idea, because that's the council chamber inside of it. So it really is the not really a guild hall, but it is really a city hall, not to be confused with the city hall, but I guess the town hall, as you would call it, around here. So, but you'll see a little bit more of the building on the outside. I've come back to this earlier photograph of it because the light was in the wrong direction when I was there a couple of weeks ago. And this is the old post office. This stands on the site of the de la Pole's family manor house. He's the one I mentioned, William de la Pole, who was first Lord Mayor for Hull. I think it was about 1320 or something like that. There's a plaque to the side which is just down there by the pedestrian lights. You'll see it on the bit of film there, and that's really what it says on the side there. And because this was built in 1909, built of Portland stone, probably Hull using it earlier than other cities. Leeds built their civic hall in I think in the 1920s, and a lot of the hedgerow built of that, because it gives a sort of cleaner lift to it, and because that's a very whiteness of it. And because this is where you can see the cream coloured telephone boxes down there, because Hull runs its own telephone system, and the only place in Britain to have its own telephone system, placed here opened in 1902. All the other telephone systems are run by BT. Was originally owned by the council, but they sold it off and in 2007 to a company called Kingston Communications, because it goes within a 10-mile radius of Hull, the system. So when I've been up to Beverley, they have the cream coloured telephone boxes up there as well. I think a lot of people complained is that when the city council sold it off, is that they squandered most of that money from the sale. They repaired some council houses only for 2 or 3 years later to have them all knocked down, so it was a complete waste of money. It's no longer a central post office at all, and on the bit of film you'll see people queuing outside, and you're thinking, why are people queuing outside that building to go in? Well, it's a Wetherspoons pub, and it must be large enough for people to sit inside, although I thought you had to sit outside at pubs, but maybe because it's so large inside, it's sort of like sitting outside. So that's the post office. I'm going to say on the other side of the road from that, we have St Mary's Church. This was the city had 2 chapels of ease. On Wednesday, we'll be seeing Holy Trinity Church, and this is the other chapel of ease. This is called St Mary, and this was on land built by owned by the de la Pole family. But when the king bought Wyke, as it was called, off the monks from Mews Abbey, is that the crown lands stand further down there. And obviously the de la Poles wanted their own chapel, and the king had his own chapel, now goes to Holy Trinity Church. And this was a chapel of ease built around 1327. And this was a chapel of ease to North Ferriby. North Ferriby is 8 miles to the west, and became a parish church in 1682. What you can't see here is that, by and large, it was built of brick, and because of the subsoil around here being largely clay, building of stone would have the building would have sunk down there as well. And that's really what sort of happened. The tower was added in 1380. As I say, it was brick built. Since then, as we'll learn, because it's got a facing of stone in it to keep the sort of lightness down. It collapsed in 1518 and sort of pulled down the west end of the church. A new tower wasn't built here until 1697. There's a proposal to widen the street across here to obviously to allow more traffic up and down it. And the only way really to retain the tower without knocking it down was to pierce it. So this was added around 1860, pushing the pavement through there. But like I say, before that, it had been blocked up and you'd have to walk round here. So that's why the road runs right up to the tower base around here. It was actually done by our friend George Gilbert Scott, who at that time then encased the whole church in this fine layer of stone all the way around it. He also heightened the tower as well. You see, he must have been sort of fairly confident. He added the top of this on here, adding generally around about another 30 feet to its height. It's obviously not open at the morning, but if you can go inside, I think it's largely open on a Thursday and a Friday, only for a short period as well, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Judging by the cobwebs on the door, it hasn't been open for the last year at all. So that's when you can go inside. This rood screen here isn't medieval at all. It's by our friend, another well-known architect who associated with George Gilbert Scott as well. It's Temple Moore, who had his studio out at Helmsley. He installed this in 1912. Because it's a lovely church on the inside, and therefore we've got the reredos behind there as well. That was because of the stone reredos placed there in 1863. So well worth going on a Thursday or a Friday to Hull, because when the churches reopen. But you can see you probably need to check on the web to see when it is going to do that. That dome we saw earlier, because this is from the Magistrates Court, basically when it moved out of the Guildhall, they built this in 2002, and that's what remains there. So I'm going to go back round the corner behind the Magistrates Court and where the statue of Charles Wilson is, and go along that road there, because passing another pub which has got a very fine exterior as well. And this was built in 1904, so contemporary of the Punch Hotel and the Empress as well. It reopened in 2018 after being closed for 6 years by a small micro brewery pub. Sorry, I put XX up there, but it's called the White Hart. If you look back from it from the other direction, like it's best seen in the morning. It's actually a very long pub that goes back a long way. I've no idea what this building was, but I assume it was a shop or something like that. And this brings us to Drypool Bridge, because it's one of the many sort of vehicular access bridges across the River Hull. There's another one similar to this higher up called North Bridge, and further down we've got Maritime Bridge. That's the permanent one that goes over the on the high arch bridge. But this is I guess a swing bridge here, and there's been bridges here of 1888, and that was actually a swing bridge. And this was replaced in 1961 by this bridge as well, because it rocks, it moves across on this sort of rocker type thing right there, because it was Because it was unusual, but it sort of, because it rocks and lifts it up, so it's not a swing bridge, but it sort of raises it up in the air. Across this side here, we're going to say was the some very large flour mills that was built for Joseph Rank in 1891. They rebuilt really after the Second World War, when they were bombed in 1940 and then demolished in August 2015. Since then, the site has laid derelict, but they say there are plans to build 117 homes on the site. So I guess it's very fine, this, because notice up here, it's dedicated to John Venn, 1834 to 1923. He was the mathematician, and because it was inspired the artist Sarah Daniels to use, I guess, his sort of overlapping circles when we go back to our maths. That's why we've got all these, if I go back to the other one here, these circular devices over here, so that when they overlap. And that was an inspiration, because John Venn, because was Holborn as well, because they incorporated into that design. This was repainted again for the Year of Culture in 2017. I say it's a lovely bridge actually to go and actually have a look at. You can walk along it. It's also got traffic lights, as you'll see when you go through the tunnel, because obviously when it turns red, the bridge is going to be raised across there. Coming across here, then you look southwards down to where we'll be going, down the side of High Street. These are the Pease Warehouses that we'll see over there. That's where we'd looked at before, is the Hull tidal barrier down there as well. And this is sort of the land that they've proposed for a long time. They've sort of cleared it, but again, nothing has happened on it. One of it's a car park and the other is a lot of rubble around there. So let's have a look at this area that we've just gone through. down the High Street. The High Street, which has got only one or two shops, or I think only one shop on it. This is a lovely area, because this is the area to come and seek out in Hull. Like I say, we're just coming down the southern end of it, because I've mentioned before that it does extend up there to the top as well. And this is the area where there's some dry docks up on here as well, probably a little higher up. There's 3 of them in succession. That's where the former dock office was up there as well. It's these dry docks, which I mentioned, where the Arctic Corsair, the Sidewinder trawler, used to be anchored in the River Hull down here. That has now been moved out of there. It's actually in, I guess, in storage at the moment. I think it's in Alexandra Dock. And when one of these dry docks up here has been dug out and cleared, is the Arctic Corsair we put up there as in a dry dock itself, and then the Sandy Bell to walk into the bottom of that dry dock and underneath the boat itself, as well as going around it. So I guess they're trying to redevelop this area up here to get people to come up there. But as I say, at the moment, it's sort of a bit of a sort of redundant area as well at the moment. So coming down here, look at some of these blocks that we're going to look at. I can say it's about from here to here, probably a 7 or 8 minute walk down here as well. This is all sort of got stone sets all the way down it. This is the Pease Warehouse down there. This area around here is where all the museums are. So we've got Wilberforce's house here, we've got the Streetlife Museum here, and then we've got the East Yorkshire or the East Riding Museum just here as well. So they're in that area. And then you can see down here some of these staves. These are the sort of lanes that could be locked off either end. So when cargoes were disembarked from the boats coming up here, they could be taken down there, and for security is that the ends of those lanes could be closed, and then they'd be put into the warehouses along there. So there's quite a lot down here, because there's a lot of these buildings are near next door to one another. And then this has been opened out here, which is Scale Lane, which we'll be looking at on Wednesday, going back into the city centre that way. And coming across here, I'm going to end today on this bridge here, because it looks like a comma or an apostrophe that swings open, and because to allow shipping up and down if there's enough water in the River Hull, or indeed anything that's going up and down, and you're meant to be able to sit on that as it opens and closes. But I probably estimate it probably isn't often during a year. So let's set off at the top of High Street. We're going to be sort of a brick wall, because some of the High Street was also hit in the World War II as well by these bombing raids on Hull as well. And this is the where a house stood. I guess I even see this one down here. It's pediment still in there, but there's nothing behind it at all. And I guess this was where, in this house, was the first bank in Yorkshire, was founded in 1754 by Joseph Pease, because his mother and father from Hull, although he was born in Ireland. So that's what that blue plaque says up there. Then come into this entrance here, because then that allows you to look into where his warehouse was. And like I say, these are built between 1754 and 1760. It's rather these that we're looking at here that go straight again onto the stave, the landing stage, the other side of there. And that's what we could see from Drypool Bridge as well, those doors in there. So they could be landed, put straight into here as well. And largely what he was doing, he was importing seeds that were crushed for linseed and for rapeseed oil. So the rapeseed we see growing in the fields at the moment is really nothing new, and we always use rather a lot of rapeseed oil as well. They were being converted into apartments. I think there's a plaque on the side. I think it says 1981 on that as well, but that's on the piece of film as well. He died in 1778, leaving an enormous sum of £80,000 in his will. Obviously, he had the bank, and he was buying and selling the seeds and the oil as well as a result of that. Coming down here, sorry, I seem to have left an old name up there from that modern building down in the Marina area, the C4DI building. So sorry about that. So these, because it was all a lot of, this was really the merchants area. Everybody who's made a name for themselves lived down the high street. It was because it was two sides of it, really. I guess it was that they wanted to show their wealth by building these large houses. This one here is built 1756, 1757 for a chap, another merchant, a tar merchant called James Hamilton. And because they actually look fairly plain on the outside, but they're very grand on the inside there as well. And like I say, this is sort of say it's got a single pediment across it, but it's got two doors on the way in. The next building down, because they've just this one here, which I'm not taking a photograph of, but this is called Oriel House down there, and that is built in 1879, and because they since 2005 is used by WISE, that's the Wilberforce Institute for the Study of Slavery and Emancipation. It's run by Hull University. But as we can see from the statue here, this is William Wilberforce, and like I say, in front of his own house there. That's it. Pictured a few dates a few weeks ago, because it was built in around about 1600 for the governor of Hull. He was really, I guess, the mayor at the time, and the Wilberforce family owned it between 1739 and 1832. It became a museum in 1906. So the statue there in front of it dates from 1884. It looks quite miserable on it, but perhaps how they saw him at the time. But like I say, if you go inside, because it's closed at the moment, when museums reopen, because you can actually go inside and see how ornate these houses were. So they must have been quite plain, apart from this one, on some of them on the outside. But here we have the stairwell depicting a black swan there, thought to have been created, this plasterwork, by Cortese, the Italian master plaster worker, and dates from around 1760. It's a museum today. I don't know, it's flicking on twice. And to say there are 7 galleries in it, some of it devoted to William Wilberforce and his work that he did. I've done a story on him in one of the previous ones, but he wasn't the first man to look at slavery, but he was the man who sort of in Parliament who drove it through in 1832 to abolish slavery. I think it was completely abolished in the 1840s. And so the galleries looked at the history of the slave trade and also looks at modern slavery, which unfortunately still takes place today, I think, in some other sweatshops in Leicester and other places like that, where they're trying to make cheap clothing as well. And like I say, some of it has got the original oak panelling in it, and like I say, that wood carved work, this is the coat of arms of the Lister family. They are the family who built this property around 1600. These museums actually link together, so you can walk out the back of the Wilberforce house and go into the Streetlife Museum, which is this modern building here, because they built probably on things that have been flattened during the Second World War. And because this is a museum to really sort of transport that opened in 1989. This is one that had the Arctic Corsair, because they located in the river behind it, because it was moved from here on Sunday the 4th of August 2019 as part of some flood prevention works being done along the river. I guess it's probably that some of that work we see at the end. I'm going to say it's then going to move back up onto that dock office road, and because they've been put in a dry dock called North End Shipyard as well. It actually is immediately behind the Wilberforce Monument and immediately behind the Hull college that we've seen before. So really just before you get to the Drypool Bridge, you're turning left up there. So if you go inside here, there are a number of galleries setting off. I'm looking at the ground floor and going back in historical time, streets laid out as Hull was in the sort of late 1950s, early 1960s. A bit further along there, you can see some of the trams around here in their distinctive cream colour as well. And up on the, say the first floor as well is sort of Hull in Victorian times as well. And going back earlier than that to Georgian times is how you'll be carried around in a taxi of the day, the sedan chairs. I've not pictured here, but there's a carriage as well that would have plied its trade up and down the Great North Road, a stagecoach, and you actually get inside of that and it jolts you around as you would have gone on a road in Georgian times, and it's quite a fascinating experience. It's something that you probably wouldn't eat a meal before you got on either, and like I say, it makes you laugh, but fortunately only on it for a minute or two, so well worth going into there. And then, like I say, into the right of the Streetlife Museum, we've got the East Yorkshire Museum in there, because they call it the MQ, the Museum Quarter around here. Again, it's got a recreation of a mammoth quite near the entrance to that. Like I say, it's a recreation of a stuffed one of its sort of height. So it's really sort of going back to sort of prehistory and then working its way through up to the sort of the medieval period, just to show you some of those things in there. Some of them are sort of set pieces of sort of life as it would have been around here in the Bronze Age. And then looking at these are very rude things have come from Roos, a bit further over. They were found in 1836 by a group of labourers, and because they were clearing a ditch at Roos Car. And because they discovered at least 5 of these figures, but we just see 2 of them here. They're kept in the best state around here. And so carbon dating of this finds that they're around about 2,600 years old. And like I say, they are sort of put together on a boat, so we probably don't really know what it's for. But people, and no doubt the eagle-eyed amongst you, would notice a rather large genitalia. It's not mentioned on most of the things, but I did find a reference to it, and to find that it's that the genitalia can be removed, so it can be figures there can either be male or female. Or I guess is that maybe they made them so large is that they had to create another space to actually attach them into it. So it might not be is that they're male or female statues, but on account of the large appendages. Oh, I can't say that word. So let's have a look at the other thing here, another wooden thing here. This is the Hatholme logboat. Like I say, this is radiocarbon dated back to around about 2,300 years ago. And like I say, made out of a piece of log and dug out the wood out of there. And this would have plied its trade up and down the Humber and its sort of tributaries. And like I say, the tree is estimated to have been around about 800 years old when it was felled 2,300 years ago. Called the Hatholme boat because it was found up a sort of smaller tributary that goes up to the just beyond the Wolds, and it was found to have been carrying a cargo. I think it was of pork and other things like that. So I guess perhaps a mobile butcher of its day. I can say a lot of these boats got caught up because a number of them were found at North Ferriby at the side there, which date from around about the same period. But unfortunately, the North Ferriby boats weren't found in as great a condition as a Hatholme boat as well. We also see some sort of Bronze Age, early Iron Age swords as well, again found in Levencar, as it says there, because when it was drained for farming as well. And also picking up when the Parisi came over here, round about, again, 2,200 years ago, or something like that, coming from the Paris area of France, and they brought their culture over with them. And These are the chalk burial figures that were placed in these burials that they had around here. They stand, I guess, 5-6 inches high, made of chalk. And like I say, these were the inspiration for the artworks that the wooden sculptures that we've seen before on the Yorkshire Walsway above East Heslington. So there's like a soldier, and this one indeed has a sword on his back, so around there, about there. So we can see some larger one, but these smaller ones, it's the most ornate one is around here as well. Like I say, unfortunately, some of these have been broken, but that's what they would have looked like. So actually, those carved statues that we see at East Heslington are really identical to that. I'm going to say it's got some fine Roman mosaics in here as well. I'm going to say these were come from really from one that's come from Brough, and the second one, and this one here is from Rudston on the Wolds. I can say it was found in a field where there's a Roman villa just outside of there. It represents Venus. She holds a golden apple up in a hand up there, and I can say, but she's won in a beauty contest. That's why there's a mirror down here. And again, probably like J-Lo or the Kardashians, they must have favoured large bottoms in those days. So she might have been quite happy with her depiction look like there. And I can say the Triton, I can say, is holding a burning torch up to her as well down there. I can say some other ones here as well. They're displayed on the ground or on the walls, and then rather a lot of them as well. And this one here shows a charioteer as well. I can say he's on a sort of a wheeled chariot behind there. Is depicted of not all the legs of a horse is on there, or the wheels of a chariot. So it's really a sort of a design element that it had in there to simplify it, to sort of really to show off what it looked like. So lots of those, like I said, we looked in there in 2016, a great museum to spend some time in as well. And like I say, it ends up in the medieval period as well. Like I said, this shows a stud wall that would have been infilled with a wattle and daubed. So coming out of that museum, we come back onto the High Street, and this is the Maester House. Say this was stands on the site of a previous house that burnt down in 1743, in which Mrs. Maester and their son died alongside two maids. Henry Maester, say, rebuilt it. He made his wealth through trading in iron between here and Sweden. And say, again, it's fairly plain on the outside. You'll notice here that it's a National Trust property. That's the blue plaque to it. The blue plaque says is that if you ring the doorbell, they'll allow you inside because that's part, I guess, of the rental of this property. I guess it's offices, and is that they'll allow you to come in and have a look at the stairwell. And that's really the sort of ornateness that you see there, rising to 2 floors with a lantern roof, I say, with fine ceiling molds around there as well, so that you can actually go in and have a look at that. And that's really the view that you can get. Then straight across the road, this was the former entrance into the East Riding Museum. It's the former Corn Exchange as well. This was built in 1856 and used as such in trading that until 1925. And then that became, as it says here, the Commercial Museum. And like I say, that is the former entrance into that museum. Looking further down, just hidden behind here, because if you go down, is that it looks like all the buildings actually face onto the street, but in fact there's a warren of buildings behind those, and I'll show you one next. But this is a Sailors Makers Arms isn't directly onto the street. You've got to go through a passage to get, a fairly wide passage to get to it, so you don't immediately see that the pub was down here. It's not a traditional pub here, as it only was made into a pub in 1988. But further down, because there's just a couple of doors down from here, is you'll see here there's a lorry was parked here. That's why they didn't quite see the 2 entrance doors to this. But this is called the Avenue, because this led in at one time to passages that went all the way down the side of the streets here. I think this is there's is a Chapel Street up here, then there's Bishop Lane further down there, and this came. You could at one time come in through here and come out the other side onto Lowgate. You could come out onto Bishop Lane. You'd come out onto Chapel Lane or Chapel Street, whichever it is. And that's really what you can't see today. That's why it's got this rather large entrance above it, the avenue. There's another door next to it because that was open when I went down there a fortnight ago, and that they allowed me to go in along there because he wanted to show me what the avenue looks like, which has just been redone at the moment, only as in the last fortnight, is that what it actually looked like if you went through here and along this passage. That's how they've done it. So these would have been a passage. I don't know whether it had been open to the air, but public would have been able to come down here. These would have been offices on either side down here, I guess, for merchants and things like that. And further down here, you could turn left or right, and that would take you down another passage. And because they're going underneath these properties as well, you'll see on the bit of film that I have, the door just below the avenue it opens up into a courtyard, and there are actually 15 houses down there as well. So the passage next to it has got a date stone above it, 1900, because those all have just been refurbished, I guess. But you can see is that that there was lots of buildings in these blocks that you possibly can't see from the public streets as well, because that's what's sort of fascinating about this area. I must thank the chap for chasing after me and asking me would I come and have a look, because I was taking photographs at the time. And some of these other ones are fine warehouses as well. A bit lower down is something called the Pacific Exchange, and that was really like a club, and I could say that's where the sort of seed and grain merchants met as well. And it's a bit lower down from the Corn Exchange, but you can see some of the warehouses here, and some of these doors here led down these staves that led down to the riverside. So there's just a couple of them open at the moment, and I could say we'll look at one in a second, but here we have Dunwell's Forge. So when I was saying that those passages go a long way back and into other areas, this is where you can see it further down here as well. This workshop here is thought to have dates from the late 16th century as well. I guess it's all timber framed inside there as well. That's probably why I've got the small windows, but you can see how far they go back, and I guess that you can turn right round there. It looks like some buildings being knocked down, but it shows you how many buildings there are hidden from view down there. On the opposite side of the street, this is one of the staves that you can look at. It's from an old English word, steve, meaning a landing place. This is around about, to give you sort of the depth of one of these passages, is 62 meters long. I'm going to say it connects between the High Street and the river itself. And because that gives a fine example of one of those. So you'll see it on the bit of film just going down there. The top of this is nearly opposite the pub Ye Old Black Boy. I have noticed is that they've swapped the sign round here as well. At one time it was a picture of a black boy up there. It says there it's dated 1729, and reason why it was called that, because the tobacco, which was sort of sold through pubs in those days, came across from Virginia, I guess, in America, and would have been sort of traded by black slaves over there, and that's probably how it's got its name as well down there. There seemed to have opened another pub there called, is it Fretwell's or something like that, fairly recently. That's Stave Lane. We're going to turn to the left to go onto the riverside, but there's another, I'm going to say, passage down here which brings you to this property just here called Crowell House. This is blocked off at the moment, and you'll see that there's some a rather large lift on High Street because the house dates from 1664. So it's just 8 years after Wilberforce House was sold in 2018 for £425,000. It's now been converted. It was in offices at one time. I think it's been converted back into a house. But again, it would be fairly ornate inside, although it's been used as offices and things like that. But you can see how dark these yards would have been and why they're sort of quite palatial on the inside. Again, it's because the river is just down there. It's blocked off at the moment, so you can't really see that view down. Because they're running parallel to this is Stave Lane Stave, which has been opened up because they can see the width of the original lane here, and because buildings would have been built right up to here as well, because leading down to the river just down here. So that's that sort of a new bridge that was opened in 2013. Took rather a long time to construct. It started in 2009, and really it's to open up the sort of the east bank of the river. And like I say, it sort of looks like an apostrophe, but you can actually sit on. It's, I guess it was meant to be a bit of an attraction and to have a cafe in there, but it doesn't seem to have quite worked out. The cafe is up for rent at the moment. The only place that it does link to is Purple Palace, a Premier Inn on the other bank, and you say it sort of hasn't redeveloped around there at all. So the only people I saw was going between the hotel and the city centre along there. So standing up here, you can walk round it in a complete circle, and here you can see up the river to where we came before. That's Drypool Bridge up there. This is the back of the museum quarter along here. And I think one of these will be the staves that you can actually go down here. So that's the sort of view up the river and the view down the river. You'll see it's actually full of water this time. Down towards the deep is beyond there. Maritime Bridge, the A63, carrying all that traffic over there, and the tidal barrier there. So what I'll do today is I'll leave you with this last piece of film. I think it's 7 or 8 minutes long, coming down the high street, because it's far better on the film to see how close all these properties are together and what they actually do look like. So I'll be back here on Wednesday looking at from Scale Lane, going along Market Street to the statue of King William, and then coming on Silver Street to the land of green ginger, and then down to Holy Trinity, Trinity House, and then back along into the city centre. So I'll leave you with this piece of film of the High Street.